wet ass P word.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. This is listener and viewer supported programming, so go to my website, echoplexmedia.com, click the support tab, and find your favorite way to support. I'm producer Dave, and you can find me on Grindr.
And I am Sylph. I used to go by HK, but now I am Sylph. You can find me on the internet, various places.
All right. Very good. Very good. Well, I have something for you that you're not going to like, but that's okay.
Oh, no.
That's not the goal of this show, is to present things that people like. Or present something that anybody but me found, actually. So here it is. This is Andrew Gold. Our Some Race is Dumber.
Genetic component to differences in intelligence among people.
What would happen if it were found that different races had different IQs?
We lived in environments that presented very different survival problems. Blacks in the UK from Africa tend to score higher on tests than other black populations, including in the UK. In fact, who have the highest level of intelligence. Not IQ has more predictive value than anything else you can measure in social science.
That's not true. That's not true. The zip code you were born in.
Health and education.
Yep, which is strongly associated with your socioeconomic status.
Of like the mainstream anti-wokesters, just to prove that they're one of the good ones.
You want to be on the right side of...
Right, yes, but on our terms, not on the wokesters' terms.
What happened to you at Cambridge? Have you been sort of booted out?
Now I am taking legal action against them for discrimination.
I would assume that anyone who uses the term wokesters doesn't belong in academia.
Also, this guy got fired, right? So so I'm guessing this is going to be another one of those cases, right, where the dude got fired, like claiming that it was for his ideas. And we're going to find out later that he was just a fucking monster to work with. Yep. Like we find out with a lot of these guys, that they're just terrible to work with. They treat other professors, they treat the students like shit. They treat the staff like the people who fucking probably treats the people who clean his office like shit. This is like what we always find out about these people.
Discuss. Is this the single most controversial topic that there is?
I think the top two would be race and pedophilia.
I knew you'd say that.
So that's why
Race and what?
conservatives.
He blanked it out. The guy said pedophilia
Oh, okay.
because he thinks that that's gonna that people are gonna think that he's a bad guy because he doesn't blank out bad words.
Especially in America, they're always calling liberals pedophiles. I think because they would call them racist, but they figured that doesn't work. So the next option is pedophile. Yeah.
So these are the two things. Yeah, they are going, you must be that. I try not to say the word too often because we have to cut it, that P word. We don't have to cut the race word, though.
Wait, why? You can say.
Tell me a little bit before.
I guess that means it's the second.
That's true, but I wonder if we have to cut a word. I mean, it's more of a concept than a word, isn't it? It's the concept of differentials in IQ.
As opposed to other words?
What's
Yeah, I don't know.
what got you studying this? What's your background?
So I'm a philosopher of biology, currently Leverhulme Early Career Fellow at Cambridge. And my interest is in evolution and applying evolutionary reasoning to problems in philosophy and science.
Okay. I interviewed Richard Dawkins the other day on stage and in Ireland, and I said in Northern Ireland. Sorry.
Oh God, I hate to see that.
I said, what would happen if it were found that people of different races had different IQs? And he said he didn't know, and he imagined it would be unlikely. What would you say to that?
That's what Richard Dawkins said.
Yes.
So the correct answer to this is, listen, friend, I hate to tell you this, but only racists and incels care about IQ tests.
Yep, that's true.
That's the right answer.
Statistically, they probably do, but that's because statistically, people of different races are treated differently in the world. So
Well, and
how they're treated affects
no.
how you score on
I'm not.
IQ.
We're not. No, actually, there is no such thing as IQ. There is the result of an IQ test or a series of IQ tests, but there is no such thing as an IQ.
Yes, what I said is how you're treated affects how you perform on an IQ test.
Well, and just the fucking questions on the test are geared. They're written by the people in power. We've been over and over and over this. This is just a way that people. Richard Dawkins should have known better. Should know better. That's the title of this segment here. Richard Dawkins should know better about a lot of things, but even he's I don't know about this weird shit.
Yeah. Well, Richard Dawkins is very brave when he is promoting what is in fact the orthodoxy in his community, which is against religion, in favor of liberalism. But
That hasn't been what he's been doing lately. He's been complaining about fucking woke people and shit. Going on talking to Andrew Gold. What the fuck are you talking about?
somewhat less adventurous when it comes to topics that would actually create trouble for him.
No, that's not true. He's been talking shit. They talk about trans people. At one time that he started fucking a little over 10 years ago when Rebecca Watson had the fucking temerity to be like, "Hey weirdo, don't hit me on me in the elevator because I can't leave the elevator." He was like, "Okay, Muslima." No, he's been wilding out for quite some time now. He just doesn't seem to believe in this race IQ pseudoscience.
Yeah, he's just probably not super racist. Probably a little racist, but not super racist.
Or just doesn't think this is true. You could be racist and not think this is true.
True. Yeah.
Been in this game long enough to know that something is up with this
really?
topic.
So you think he knows but didn't want to say?
Look, I have no inside information about him specifically.
This is that Sam Harris shit where I think we're all on the phone with me telling I was right about this, but none of them will say it. But he was talking about this same subject, remember?
Yep.
I certainly know many examples.
Everyone agrees with me, but in
Very
secret.
Prominent people who have one position.
Actually, they go to a different school
in private and then another one in public. I'm not going to say anything, but give any examples. But that is the case. Many people will report the same thing. Dawkins, it was a year or two ago, he tweeted something to the effect that, well, obviously eugenics would work. It's just we are against eugenics for moral reasons.
Work for what?
People
Yeah, what is the goal? What goal do you?
on him. So, well,
Like if your goal is to eliminate black people, then yes, eugenics would work. But that's a real shit goal.
Right, any of the goals of eugenics seem shitty, right? Like to remove people with what we call mental disabilities or whatever. That's a shit goal too, because those are people. It's all its goal is to like slice and dice and slice off segments of society that basically that the wealthy, as we used to, the landed gentry find inconvenient.
in humans for it's just evolution denial. Evolution doesn't apply to humans or doesn't apply above the neck. Evolution stopped 100,000 years ago or whenever it was, and so it's
No. Nobody thinks. What the fuck is he talking about?
be any differences between populations now. So people were jumping on him, and then a few minutes later, he tweeted Angela Saini's book, praising. She's this anti-racist author about how important her message is to neutralize that. So
I think he's like kind of glossing over here, though, that like the goal of eugenics is to eliminate minorities from the population
Or undesirable, or just traits that the those in power find undesirable, right? It doesn't have to be race. It could be, and it is people with disabilities, people like they could try to eugenics out the gay, but it would turn out that they were like, oh shit, I guess some people are just gay no matter how many folks you try to fucking sterilize.
Yeah. So like I feel like he's what Richard Dawkins is doing is when he's said, assuming that this guy is quoting his tweet correctly, eugenics would obviously quote work unquote. He's implying that like the goal of eugenics is something that should be desired. Because like I don't think that anyone would argue that like eugenics can be used to achieve a certain goal. People are arguing that that goal is monstrous and atrocious. Like bombing the shit out of the UK, like nuking it into oblivion would work, quote unquote, to get rid of the UK. But that's a shitty goal. So no one should want that goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and someone in chat said that like getting rid of like certain diseases and whatnot. Yeah, but that's like a very different thing than eugenics, right? Because if you if you go like to the doctor and you're like, hey, we're thinking about getting pregnant, and they go, hey, you have this gene where you don't have this disease, but there's a chance your child might have this horrific disease if you decide to have a child. Maybe, and the doctor, fertility doctor might say, hey, maybe there's a lot of kids that need to be adopted. But I don't think that's eugenics. Like eugenics is like institutionalized. Eugenics isn't about like personal choice.
Or you could use like IVF and select an embryo that doesn't have the genetic disease. Like that, you could argue, I guess, that that's eugenics, but I don't think anyone would call that eugenics.
Well, and again, that's when we talk about like, we'll call it like big E eugenics. It's like it's institutionalized, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
right? Is that it's being done by by powerful people to create a societal outcome.
Sterilizing the quote undesirables, like you put it. That's what people think of when they hear the term eugenics.
And I don't know. I mean, some of the undesirables are incels, and like, I mean, that problem, I suppose, takes care of itself. But
rubbed me the wrong way a bit when some of the new atheists portray themselves as brave truth tellers, and much of what they say is true enough, right? The Earth isn't 6,000 years old. That's important to say that, but it would be nice to move on to new frontiers. Yeah.
Yeah, but they already have, dude. You're the one who's late to the fucking party, dude. The new atheists all turned into fucking, yeah, they all turned into gamer gators and shit, dude. Yeah, friend, you're late to the party. I'm sorry. Where have you been? Like, where has this motherfucker been?
And so you would posit, and I suppose it's something that many of us, I suppose it's so taboo that many of us haven't even considered it, especially outside of the science realm, because we're not thinking about science anyway most of the time. I'm not. But that the last 100,000 years, as you say, there were populations who had no way of contacting one another or didn't contact one another, who lived under completely different environments and climates and had different challenges and would have passed on their genetics in a different way. So is that what you're saying? Would it stand to reason then that
But that's not, would it stand to reason? Well, then now you're just asking for people's opinion, aren't you?
So let's take him at face value here. Guess where intelligence evolved?
Narnia.
Africa. What did we get from like Northern Europeans? The ability to drink milk when you're an adult.
I was going to say the Black Plague.
Actually, resistance to the Black Plague is a specifically European trait.
Oh. Right. But that's
like in 100,000 years, you can't really evolve that much. It took millions of years for humans to go from extremely ape-like. Like the first humans, the first members of the genus Homo were very ape-like. They were like, barely distinguishable from what we call apes today. And it took millions of years, literal millions of years, for the genus Homo to evolve into Homo sapiens, modern day humans. So if he's talking about like 100,000 years, that's like the blink of an eye in evolutionary terms.
But I think also that's like first of all, like it's like a red herring or whatever, because you would have to demonstrate that in that 100,000 years that certain kinds of evolution happened. Like if you're going to make the claim, but he's not even like saying that that's what we need to do. He's saying that it just stands to reason, which just means I believe, and you should too.
Yeah. And really, like, we can thank Northern Europeans for the ability to drink milk. I can't because I'm allergic to it, but at least I produce the enzyme to digest it.
I understand.
Is including in IQ.
There don't have to be differences, but
population. This is all built on a pretty fucked up foundation. First of all, the foundation here is that this test over time has measured people's ability to fucking solve new problems and adapt, which I don't think anybody's demonstrated that it does. And then that, like, even if it does for like a certain group of people, that doesn't mean that like when you translate it into another language that it's going to test for the same thing, right? It might just be testing for people's ability to understand a shitty translation of something that was once in French into like fucking English or something like.
And if there were like a real correlation between them, then you wouldn't have different populations of the same race producing different results. And you do, because it's based on population, not race, and population correlates with socioeconomic status.
Could also just, again, we've talked about this a million times. Like if you skip breakfast, you're probably going to do worse on the test. Like,
yep.
So that means if you live in a food insecure family, it's all going to correlate to like socioeconomic status.
Are separated, so there's limited gene flow between them. This raises the possibility that there could be differences due either to random forces, drift, or due to the fact that they face different selection pressures. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to human populations, clearly we lived in environments that presented very different survival problems. People living in Africa, in the savannah, or who are facing winters in Asia and Europe, or who live only in snow, live in the desert. These are all different environments. And you have to, in order to survive and pass on your genes, you have to perform different tasks. Now, that doesn't mean that people in Africa have genes specifically for hunting gazelles, and Eskimos have genes for ice fishing.
What the fuck?
And, Middle Easterners have genes for riding camels. That's not what.
All right, it was getting bad, and then of course it was the Middle Easterners have the genes for riding camels. It was like, dude, what the fuck?
Well, to be fair, he said it didn't mean that.
Right, but then
It just means, some other racist shit.
But the only things he could come up with were like, oh, Eskimos, they be ice fishing. like, God damn.
I mean, you wouldn't say, like, most people don't have the stereotype that Middle Easterners are exceptional at math, right? But they've invented algebra.
Right. In
Named
fact,
after, like, algebra comes from what is it? An Arabic word.
Yeah. So, but people, and I don't think very many people anymore have the stereotype that people in the Middle East are good at riding a camel either.
Yeah.
I think that was like an old Bugs Bunny cartoon stereotype. Like,
Most of the specific problems that we faced, we solved by developing technologies, skills, culturally, and transmitting them and developing them over time. But still, in order to do those things, you might have needed slightly different sets of mental and physical abilities. The most obvious are skin color and other physical features, but you can just look at somebody and see this kind of more squat, light-skinned person is adapted to snow, and this tall, lean person with dark skin is adapted to.
has this guy ever been in Northern Europe? Some of them motherfuckers are tall. Some of them motherfuckers are like tall. What is he talking about? Everybody in the snow is short. Shut the fuck up. No, they're not.
I think what he's neglecting to mention here, though, is like when you're talking about those kinds of genes, like genes for skin color, you're talking about an extremely simple set of genes compared to like the genes for, if there are any, the genes for like intelligence, quote unquote. Like skin color, you can, if you had access to, a fertilized egg and you could modify some genes in there, you could probably make like a few changes and alter someone's skin color.
Stop
but
giving
if
these
you want to
people
make
ideas.
someone like super intelligent or super stupid or whatever, like you're going to need a lot more than just a few gene changes.
A hot environment that, and some people are very short on average. Some people are taller. These were all. There was much of this as a result of selection for the ability to perform the tasks in their environment.
Yeah, but he's just wrong. That's the problem, is that it's the fucking, that it's just not, no, the places where it snows, like they're not all just a bunch of shorties. Like he's just wrong. Like it doesn't matter. Like the rest of this doesn't matter because there's fucking hella tall people in Finland and Norway. The fucking, like the legend of it's legendary, right? But the legends of the Vikings, they were all from Northern Europe and they were all supposed to be tall, I thought.
I think so. Yeah.
Or at least that some of them were depicted or described as tall.
Also, like another thing that he's kind of neglecting to mention here is that a lot of these genes that control, skin color and how certain features of your body develop, those genes are shared by everyone. Everyone has those genes. It's just how much they're expressed that determines, your skin color, your height, your build, there are different factors than genetic that he's kind of glossing over, and the term for that field of study, that thing, is called epigenetics. Epi meaning above, and genetics, meaning your genes. So, if you take into account epigenetic factors, you can have two people with absolutely identical DNA that have completely different appearances.
Right. We're talking about, again, most of this is going to go back to socioeconomic stuff, at least in the modern world. Like, were you fed well? Were you able to go out and exercise?
Now, most people will acknowledge that there are at least some physical differences. There are people who will even try to argue about that, but Africans tend to have darker skin, and that is due to more sun exposure, and people who are exposed to less sunlight have lighter skin.
Yeah, but like Haitians are also considered black, and they're not from Africa, so it's like it doesn't mean that like society is going to see you as black if your skin is dark. It doesn't have anything to do with Africa, really. It's just that the majority of people that we as Americans interact with, who are black, have African ancestry. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people from other fucking places that are black too.
Is it possible? I'm just wondering, and I'm just thinking out loud because I don't know anything about this. Is it possible that even in the few hundred years?
Wait, why are you conducting this interview about this if you know nothing about it? Just nothing? You're like, oh, I'm just going to have this person come on here and fucking just spew racist pseudoscience. But I don't really know anything about the fucking subject matter. Absolute dumb fuck.
Slavery, that black people might have evolved differently, had to be stronger in many ways because so many were just sort of taken out and killed. And could you say maybe even a similar thing about the Holocaust with the Jews? Even that was a much shorter time, of course. But is there any?
That's very possible. I'm not aware of direct evidence for natural selection in African slaves or in Jews, but.
Oh, be careful here, buddy. Be fucking careful here.
Intense enough selection pressure.
Not that you have the rest of this
change
time.
Change in a very short period of time is very possible. If there were some traits that made Jews more likely to survive an event which kills half of the population, and in Europe that's a big selection event, then that would have some effect on the second generation.
How did you find your radio interview with, I think it was Nick Ferrari? And I think he didn't come out looking good, despite the controversial topic you're bringing forward. All of the comments were quite angrily directed at him.
Well, a lot of the comments were on some irrelevant topic. I'm not sure what his audience is like.
I think it's cross-board.
I don't know. That was such an insult to.
Maybe during red light, we'll try to figure out what did this guy get fired for.
Intelligent discussion, like for him, the way that he behaved. So they asked me to. I woke up and I had this email saying, "We want you to come on in in 20 minutes or something." I'd missed the email. And I said, I can come on, in 15 minutes from now. They said, okay. And they asked me to send the article that was the subject of controversy. And so I sent it to them. And like 12 minutes later, I came on. And now Ferrari had not taken a break between the time I sent the article and when he was interviewing me. So he had absolutely no clue what he was talking about. It was just somebody.
So just like what Andrew Gold admitted, right? This other interviewer didn't know anything about this. Andrew Gold doesn't know. Nobody knows anything about this. The only one who knows anything about this is this douchebag over here on the right side.
Producer put it in front of him and said, look, this guy said this bad thing. And here's the quote that's bad. So he doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know what the topic is, why I said what I said, what the evidence is, nothing. And he's supposed to be this like conservative, anti-woke crusader. He's always going on about how he's against wokeism and I cancel culture or something. So just the context is that
Maybe this guy had already encountered this bullshit before and was like, I am going to bully this douchebag for a while. Maybe that's all that happened here.
result of my my Substack post on the topic of race differences. It was called The Guide for the Hereditarian Revolution. There was
Ooh,
Substack
yikes.
allows this guy on.
at the University of Cambridge and calls to fire me and so on. We can talk a bit about that later. Anyway,
Well, let's get into why you were fired. I guarantee that that wasn't just one article.
he says, how could you say this? And he says, I talked to a black student at Cambridge who says that you're making her life bad by your presence there and by you expressing these ideas. I mean, exactly the same tactics that standard woke tactics, right, that are now being employed by the anti.
So maybe he did know about the. Wait a minute. Either he didn't look. Wait a minute. Either he didn't do any looking into it, or he spoke to a black student who was like, "Oh yeah, this guy actually makes it kind of shitty to be black at Cambridge." Which is it, buddy? Now this guy's contradicting himself, right? Because either the guy didn't look into him at all. What if he looked into you and the article wasn't being? They weren't having the article sent to them for the host, but rather for the producers. The producers could read the article. What if the host had already read the article?
Crusader. And it's kind of awkward for me because I don't really know what he's talking about. I can't comment on a student. I'm an employee at Cambridge, so that's not the way to have an intelligent, rational discussion, is to try to say, oh, somebody's offended by you.
I don't think that Nick Ferrari was offended by you, really. I think it's just it's a way to continue this sort of.
What they're doing right here is downplaying his actions and saying, oh, this person's offended by me.
Right.
No, they're not offended by you. They're offended by your actions. If I go into someone's house and I take a shit on their floor, they're not offended by me. They're offended by my actions. I just shit on their floor. That's a fucked up thing to do to someone because they got to clean that shit up.
Right. And also maybe you weren't invited in the first place.
As you say, maybe being anti-woke and so on, but look how sensible I am. I'm going to get a real racist on and tell them off.
Well, of course. So the main concern of
Imagine some professor going into their lecture hall and greeting their students for the day and then just dropping trow and taking a shit right there on the desk and then leaving and then being upset when the students are like, I'm offended by the professor shitting all over his desk.
Tell them off.
And the professor's like, these woke ass students won't let me shit on my desk.
Well, I'm going to get a real racist on and tell them off.
Well, of course. So the main concern of the mainstream anti-wokesters is to prove that they're one of the good ones. Right? They're and just suck up.
Which we do want to be. You want to be on the right side of.
Right. Yes, but on our terms, not on the wokesters' terms.
Yeah.
We want to
get it right.
We
I hate to break it to you, dude, but you're not on the right side of history.
By, as you say, getting it right, and by not.
Actually, I love to break it to him.
The people who we claim to be opposed to. So then he reads me the statement that he doesn't like, which is that without affirmative action, the undergraduate population at Harvard would be 0.7% black. I said, how could you say this? Now, remember, he got this, was it 12, 14 minutes ago, and he didn't read it. So he's just reading it. Now, if he would click the link that I provided, he would see that the source is Harvard. Harvard said this. So
explain that. Why Harvard said that?
Well, because they were sued.
I don't think Harvard said that.
Discrimination against Asians in undergraduate admissions. In the course of it, they of course weren't announcing this. Oh, by the way, if we didn't have affirmative action, this is what would happen. They were forced to reveal this statistic. And then I just quoted what Harvard said, and that people had it.
So that doesn't really surprise me. What surprises me is that these guys don't understand the underlying implications of that statistic. You know, that statistic means that the black community is so underserved by the education system that they would be barely represented in college if it weren't for systems being in place to compensate for how shitty that our education system treats them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, we're talking about Harvard too. It's like one university, right? Like it's really interesting that they always focus on these elite institutions too, because this isn't where most people go to school. Most people don't go to Ivy League schools. It's just really interesting that their focus is always on these Ivy League schools. I think it's because they think that that's what it means to like get a good education or whatever, is to go to these like historically like white rich universities. And so it just also kind of says something about where they are as far as their like understanding of like society and what it means to get an education.
Yeah, so I said it because Harvard said it, and he just moved on. And he said, I've talked to this student, and she says that
she's uncomfortable."
Now he had actually.
The question is, was she made uncomfortable by him prior to this article because of his fucking behavior on campus, right? Because
Yep.
Because I don't think most of the college kids are reading this guy's fucking Substack, right?
Yep.
Like I think it's probably, if you're like supposed to be like publishing, like if you're supposed to be like an academic, it might be bad to even have a Substack, right? It might not, you should probably just be publishing your work, not like giving your fucking hot takes on race on fucking Substack. It just seems like a very unprofessional thing for an academic at a prestigious university to be doing in the first place.
He interviewed, I've seen a Ferrari and another journalist do this, actually several journalists. The Daily Mail published a fake quote about attributing it to me in their
well, that's the Daily Fail. Everybody gets misquoted by that. The Daily Fail doesn't even know who I am, and they've misquoted me.
An article that in a meritocracy there would be no black professors at Harvard, in quotation marks. That's what the Daily Mail said.
Well, that's fucking stupid.
And
so
that's false.
I feel like a lot of these ideas about meritocracy come from not understanding the kind of opportunities that you're both afforded as a wealthy white student and denied as a poor black student. You know what I mean? Like,
and how there's like a sliding scale there too, where like there's a point where the poor white student might have more opportunities in some ways than like a black student from like a middle class family, but like it all gets real kind of messy in there. And like but you know, for a while, and I still think it's like not the worst way to talk about this. For a while, when people were getting like kind of shitty about everybody talking about white privilege, I said, okay, well, why don't we talk about the burden that is put on non-white people instead? And people didn't like that either when I wanted to talk about that. Because to some extent, privilege is just the lack of burden, right?
To an extent, yeah. And it's like the opportunities that are afforded to you, you know, because like as someone who was born into a middle class family, I was afforded a lot of opportunities that someone who is born into a lower class family would not have been afforded. And I was also afforded a lot of opportunities by being male, by being white, by being cisgendered, by being straight.
Even just by being kind of tall.
Yeah, definitely being tall. Yeah. So,
and I'm not talking about being able to reach things in the cabinet either.
I mean, they do make step stools to equalize that opportunity.
We should outlaw those.
Step stools are DEI tools.
That's right.
But you know, someone who was born into a whole lot of privilege, like I do kind of like, I don't want to say I empathize with these people because I absolutely do not, but I kind of understand where they're coming from, where they don't see that. They don't see that all of these little like notches on their belt, is that the right phrase?
I don't know.
Like all these little like plus ones that they get in life add up a lot. Like I was afforded opportunities. I'm not going to say just because I'm a white, straight, cis male, but like they definitely helped me reach areas that I probably wouldn't have been able to, or at least would have been much harder to if I weren't any of those things. You know, if I were part of any marginalized group, you know, if I were black, if I were trans, if I were female, if I were gay, I wouldn't have had such an easy time getting to where I have gotten in life. You know what I mean?
False statement. There's
And I feel like a lot of these guys, because it's always fucking guys. A lot of these guys, well, actually, that's not true. There are a lot of white women that don't recognize their own privilege.
Remember Caliper Claire?
Yeah, but like there are a lot of people that don't recognize that privilege, don't recognize how much is afforded to them by society and by, you know, all these companies that want to hire people that are a good culture fit. And like culture fit is just code word for like not a minority.
Generally.
Not generally, always. It is always a code word for not a minority.
I don't know that it's always, but yeah, like if the office looks and sounds a certain way, if somebody else comes in and looks and sounds a different way, then somebody might say that's a bad culture fit. You're correct. But that could also just be class, right? Like if somebody comes in and they're, you know, good at the job or whatever, but they're from a different class, or even maybe like, you know, here in Silicon Valley, if somebody's from the South and speaks with a Southern accent, people might assume they're stupid. And then they wouldn't fit the culture, even though they're just as good at their job or better than everybody else. There's all kinds of stuff that goes into like office culture, but it ain't ever good, right? That's why people say when you go somewhere and they're like, oh, this place is like a family, you better go apply somewhere else.
Yep. And also it doesn't stop at like the hiring process. You know, in the job, you're afforded opportunities because of all of these factors. You know, like I can't tell you how many times I have been in a meeting where I have seen a woman trying to speak and a man just speaks out of turn on top of her. Like it happens all the fucking time. And no one, like, sometimes it's called out. A good manager will call that out. But a lot of times, you know, people don't call that out. They don't recognize it and they don't call it out. You know,
right.
Because like as a woman, I can't exactly speak for women because I'm not a woman, but, you know, people who are raised in American society experience a lot of like training, I guess you would call it, or like, you know, socialization, where as a woman you're not allowed to speak out of turn. You know, you'll get called out on it, but as a man you absolutely are. You're allowed to step on anyone as long as they're not.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
As I'm trying to break in on my own podcast, it's fun listening to you just talk about people talking over other people. You know, like it's just a simple idea that if a man is assertive, he's like tough or whatever. And if a woman's assertive, sometimes they like call her a bitch.
Mm-hmm. And also men are allowed to be emotional in work and women aren't.
Right. Because that's
like,
because men are socialized to express their emotions as anger.
Well, not just that, but like men are allowed to be, you know, so emotional that they can't come into work. And it's like, okay, well, he's going through a lot. And when women do that, it's like, You know what I want to say,
Yeah, I'll
but I'm
say
not
it.
going to say it because it's so fucking offensive.
I mean, it's that time of the month.
Yeah, that's so offensive, and it's like a woman in a job just can't be allowed to express emotion without people assuming a lot of things about them, and like it's fucked up because there's a lot of privilege that you're given as a white cis male. And there's a lot of expectations that aren't put on you as well. You know, I guess that's part of your privilege is that you don't have to meet these.
Back to the race thing. Back to the race thing at work. Also, if a black man shows a little bit of anger, it's treated a lot differently than a white man. Especially if the black guy's like kind of big.
Yeah,
like people are like, oh. Whereas if a white guy like bangs on his desk or whatever, people are like, oh, he's a go-getter or whatever the fuck they would say in 1972.
he's just very passionate.
right. Whereas the black guy, ooh, he's got an anger problem.
Yeah.
Same exact behavior, maybe the same exact circumstance, you know?
And
Yeah, so like this kind of like discrimination, it doesn't stop at the hiring process. It lasts through your entire career.
false statement. There's a bell curve. There's a distribution of
And the same goes for education as well.
Bailey Nelson, and that's a false statement. There's a bell curve. There's a distribution of ability. There are highly intelligent blacks in a meritocracy. There would be some black people who were.
But the thing you call intelligence isn't the only way that people rise through fucking like bureaucratic structures. There are other good traits that people have that give folks reason to trust them with responsibility. It isn't just this like fucking like almost like non-quantifiable, except for some test that doesn't work, version of what this guy thinks is intelligence that gives you like would give reason for you to have authority, for you to be a decision maker in any given organization. It might not just be that you're the sharpest fucking crayon in the box. You might be just the best crayon in the box. I don't know what that would mean. And now that we're talking about crayons, those are different colors. So maybe I should do something else here. But I mean, what if you're not the smartest or whatever, but you're the best at working with other people, the best at keeping other people on task, the best at explaining things that you do understand to other people so that they can understand it and do a better job at their work. That's not just raw intelligence, right? Or what they would call raw intelligence, which I don't really think exists in the way that they describe it. Those are like people skills. Those are like what we call soft, or there's like soft skills. We call that. I don't know even if that's the right wording, but those are like, yeah, you're not, and we keep coming back to this because we're, it's Silicon Valley. You're not the best coder, but boy, howdy, you got to be the manager because you sure are good at working with the coders. Sure are good at keeping everybody on task and making sure that people's needs are being met and making sure that everybody gets what they need to finish their job, making sure that people can work together, making sure that people's work isn't duplicated, that kind of stuff. And that's like you don't need what these people would consider like raw intelligence to do those things.
Yeah. And, same with, like I was saying, the expectations of you as well are different when you're, there are good skills, like you said, that help you get to good positions, but there are also bad skills that are dismissed when you are a certain kind of person and like really focused on when you're another kind of person.
Yeah, like I said, anger.
Yeah, like, when you're a woman in politics, everything you do has to be like exceptionally calculated. Whereas when you're a man, you can say whatever the fuck you want and people will still vote for you because whatever, he's a guy. He's just being a guy. It's locker room talk, whatever.
Some black people who were on that far end of the bell curve, who would
the bell curve, you say,
who would perform scholarship at a very high level. Now, taking the statement that I said, which is that the number would be very low, it would in fact approach zero, would be a very small number, but there would not be zero. There would be some.
I would approach zero. Don't worry. There's a couple of the good ones. Oh my fucking god! It's worse when you put the academic window dressing on it, friend Nathan. It's worse. When you say zero, it's ignorant and you haven't thought about it much. And maybe you could change your thinking by taking a little closer look into things. When you try to dress it up as if it's academic, now it seems like you've thought about this for a long time and decided to come to the most bigoted fucking possible position you could.
Daily Mail has published this fake quote, which they refused to correct. They refused to even take off the quotation marks. And this is considered totally okay, according to British.
Well, no, nobody thinks the Daily Mail is totally okay, friend. Like, dude, this is incorrect. This is not totally okay. Listen, nobody to root for here.
Probably people at work at the Daily Mail don't think it's okay.
Like, well, you gotta fucking pay the bills.
Wow.
I submitted a complaint to IPSO, which is the organization that maintains the so-called ethics in British journalism. They said,
"Oh no, he tried to get the Daily Mail censored." I bet this guy thinks censorship is bad, though.
Make up quotes. What's wrong? What are you talking about?
That's insane. So presumably, like, not all of this is. There being not so many black students and professors, this is one of those things with humans, I suppose, like, what makes somebody gay, what makes someone this. Intelligence and IQ, there must be so much that is either written into us or environment or culture. Is it?
Again, I hate to fucking be banging on this dead galaxy brain horse here. Intelligence and the result of an IQ test. I don't even think we can measure intelligence the way these guys want to talk about it. But intelligence and IQ is just like, how'd you score on a test one day?
Is it a whole mix of those things? And is it to do with culture, really?
There's a major genetic component to differences in intelligence among people. Now,
where did you find this out? Where'd you hear that? Because we have okay, it's short of like what we'd call like learning disabilities. I don't think there's evidence for this, that there's a genetic component to how well you score on an IQ test.
So I think this is another case of like correlation does not equal causation, because like there might be a correlation between someone's race and their score on an IQ test, but that's not causation.
Also, like,
you know what I mean?
And not to belabor this point too much, I think a lot of these people, like, people be taking IQ tests online that tell them they have a 407 IQ. You know what I'm saying? This is no longer, if it ever was at the beginning when it was first started, it was started by like some like French academics where they were just trying to find areas where students needed more tutoring or more help to try to, like, get their proficiency up in math or reading or things like that. It was like a sort of a standardized test to sort of tell them how to help which individuals needed more help in which subject matters. It was never meant to be applied anything like the way that these people are trying to apply this series of tests.
Now, genes by themselves don't do anything, and all our traits arise in the context of our physical environment and our cultural environment. And you can't talk about something. It's very dangerous to talk about something being in the genes or being genetically determined. But
it's not dangerous. It's stupid because it's so often wrong.
Among people. Now, we live in more or less similar cultures, similar cultural environments. We all live in a physical environment with a certain level of oxygen and certain nutrients available.
Even that's wrong. Even that is fucking wrong, man. Like, if you live in an area that is surrounded by freeways, you do not get the same air quality as someone who lives in the fucking burbs.
Well, I don't think that I think he was saying that you live with a certain amount. I'm not defending this guy, but I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think he's saying that we all have the same air quality. I don't think he said that.
I mean, he didn't say exactly that, but he said, you know, you live with the same amount of oxygen. It's like, that's
Okay,
not
I'm gonna go back.
entirely accurate.
We're going back. I heard what he said.
We all live in a physical environment with a certain level of oxygen and certain nutrients available to us.
Yeah, he didn't say the same. He said certain. So he didn't say that everybody's air quality is the same.
Now, there'll be some environmental differences between people, which will explain some differences. If somebody spends more time in school, that could have
That's probably going to correlate really strongly to them doing well on standardized testing, you dumb fuck. And that's going to probably line up pretty well with their socioeconomic status, which unfortunately, because we live in a deeply racist society, is going to map onto race in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah, like mom can't take me to school today and the bus doesn't go through my neighborhood. So I guess I'm just not going to spend any time at school.
On the test. If or somebody has a better diet, they could be taller, they could be faster. Now, does that mean that if I were raised by Usain Bolt's parents, that I would be Usain Bolt's parents?
Oh, he wanted to call him Hussein Bolt because of course he did. Usain Bolt. Yeah, he just wanted to call him Hussein because he looks Muslim-y to me. He black, right?
Probably not. Now, it could be that I would be a little faster than now. It could be that his parents did something that contributed, or he grew up in an environment where there was.
But like, how come he can see that, but he can't see the difference between like minute differences in an IQ test score
on athletics or running or whatever? That could well be the case. And if Usain Bolt had been raised in my environment and gone to the same schools that I did, I don't know, I have no idea what his IQ is, but maybe it would be.
You don't know because he's probably not a dumb fuck who ever took an IQ test.
He's so close to the point here. He's like self-aware wolf. He's like,
also, this is really
so
crazy
close.
because he's also just operating under the assumption that he's smarter than this Usain Bolt guy with no fucking evidence to fucking suggest that's the case because this other guy's faster than him. He's like, well, I must be smarter than him. Well, how do you know? What if that dude could run circles around your ass? Like in both ways, right?
Yeah.
Like the assumption baked in here is that this guy's smarter than this other guy, but I don't know why he's assuming. I mean, I know why he's assuming that, but the reason he's assuming that is stupid.
Yep.
He's like, I don't know what his IQ is. Well, then fucking there's every chance that he's smarter than you. What now, motherfucker?
But like the difference here is not like, so the difference between someone's musculature and someone's skeletal system is a lot bigger than the difference between like just their brain. Like when you're
like barring any injury
develop,
or like disease, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. But like when you develop, you can only train so much. You can't out train your own like body's limit. I guess you could take steroids, but like without drugs, you can't out train your body's own limit of like, this is how big my muscles will get. I just can't go past that. It's like a plateau. Whereas like if you study, you can always improve your score on an IQ test. You can always improve it. There's no limit to that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
A few points higher. But the environment, for a lot of these traits, the environment only goes so far. And a lot of the differences are explained by genetic differences. And very likely that, in fact, if Usain Bolt had been raised, if we traded places at birth, he'd be in the Olympics anyway.
I suppose,
But that doesn't mean that you're smarter than him. He hasn't like this. I'm so fucking annoyed by this assumption that he thinks that he's smarter than this guy. Now he thinks he's smarter than this guy because it's a black athlete. He must be stupid. Shut up and run, dumbass. It's like what he's saying, right? But we don't know this. We don't know. I don't know shit about Usain Bolt. I've heard the name. He's got a cool name for a runner, right? What a cool name. He's the Bolt. Like what a cool name for a runner.
Fastest man alive.
For all we know, he's also the smartest man alive. Whatever the fuck that means. Just nobody ever asked him about that shit.
What people would say about the difference there is that Usain Bolt, we're talking about a very objective measure that is basically primal. I mean, animals can do this. This is running fast. That's the human body running fast over a distance. Whereas IQ tests, people will argue, have mostly been set by the very people who seem to excel in them. So how we
this guy's going to bring up Asians. Watch, here's the part where he brings up the model minority.
Is a football player, a soccer player, or whatever? Is David Beckham incredibly intelligent because he can see the way the everything's going to unfold in front of him before in much faster than you or I could? Or are we more intelligent because we could do better, probably, I imagine, on an IQ test than he could do?
But again, now you're just being sportsist, whatever the fuck, right? Athletist. You don't know how well this now they're doing it to a white guy.
At least they're doing it to a white guy.
It's like, oh, you fucking no. Do they know about like some of these amazing people who come out of a university that are like a academic and athletic, like all American, who are just like fucking like at the top of their fucking game in both? Like a lot of them are Mormon, but I think that's just because they're genetically superior. I don't know. But like, do they know that like you could be an athlete and a brilliant student? Do they not know that there are like the captain of the football team in some places also got fucking straight A's and is on the honor? Do they not know that this exists?
Probably not.
So that
they think race and IQ is a thing.
Could do better, probably, I imagine, on an IQ test than he could do. So that like isn't that the
I don't know. Sounds like you just described him as having some pretty good spatial reasoning there, friend.
Criticism that some would say about the concept.
Well, incidentally, David Beckham, he does what you call football, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in American football, they actually do have to take an IQ test, and
wow,
there's a.
I've never heard this.
Why would they have to take an IQ test for football?
Relationship between intelligence and performance as a quarterback.
That's interesting.
Some positions require less.
No, your performance. Shut the fuck up. Your performance as a quarterback by the time you get to the NFL is demonstrated by your performance as a quarterback. Shut the fuck up. Shut the absolute fuck up.
Than others, and this is well known to football recruiters.
That's fascinating.
So, in fact, the ability to make those decisions in a sports context is correlated with just your general ability to take a pencil and paper test, the general health and energy of the brain. So it could well be that many sports players do have, maybe you don't need an IQ of 150 to be. That's not the main thing that explains their ability, because the physical traits may be more important, but a certain level of general intelligence is probably being drawn upon. And there was one quarterback, I think it was Michael Vick, who got an unusually low score for a quarterback on the Wonderlic IQ test that they administer, and he ended up killing a dog, and I guess
dog fighting.
Yeah, he was doing dog fighting, which is disgusting, but it has nothing to do. He's like, look, they let a black guy throw the ball, and then he went and killed a dog. That's what this guy just fucking said. Like, he got a low IQ score. They let him throw the ball anyway. And then he killed a dog. And what the fuck?
Went to prison.
Oh my God.
So he made he was, I guess, an okay quarterback, but he not good at making decisions.
Jesus, that's horrible. So,
but wait, no, you could be a person who scores high on these kinds of IQ tests and justify dogfighting to yourself just by fucking convincing yourself that it's okay. Like you don't have to be dumb to do something horrible.
In fact, I would say that the smartest people, well, maybe not the smartest people, but smart people very often can justify doing horrible things to themselves.
Yeah. I think anybody can.
justify to themselves doing horrible things.
Harder thing to measure intelligence than running speed.
But yeah, so okay, so how do you measure intelligence? What is
You generally can't. Not in this like you're 3% smarter than me kind of way that they think they can.
intelligence mean?
I mean, like, define intelligence.
I think it means
I can define running fast.
being able to write interesting essays, right? Because that's what I care about.
Exactly.
Right? So,
Yeah.
And somebody, my friend thinks it's the ability to solve math problems, right? Because
Yes.
that's what he likes.
I think it's about being able to hold conversations in a way that remains appealing to a broad audience.
These guys can't fucking define intelligence. They can't
they're
even
just-
define intelligence. How would they hope to measure it?
They're making their own point. They're making our point for us here. And I thought it was interesting that Andrew Gold is like, I can have a conversation that appeals to a broad audience. No, dude, your fucking shit appeals to bigots, Andrew.
Like, I can write a bunch of code that a lot of people think is like, oh, he's so smart he can write code. I can't fix a fucking car. When my car has a problem, I take it to a mechanic. That's just my training. Like, you can train someone to score well on an IQ test. That doesn't mean they're smart.
That remains appealing to a broad audience.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so so how do we approach this scientifically, right? How do we measure intelligence? These are
Most of the people in the scientific community say that it's fucking very difficult to do this. And if they're in like cognitive, like sort of cognitive scientists, they're like, I don't know.
Yep.
kind of subjective things, like what is a good essay? What's a good conversation? I see YouTube videos with millions and millions of views, and I don't think they're that good.
No.
So
That's popularity.
but are they? Is that intelligence? Oh, it's subjective. So that's not science. Okay. So what if we give people?
I mean, if getting a lot of views means you're intelligent, then Oprah is probably the most intelligent person in the world.
Oprah's a monster, but she is a smart cookie. I don't know how, like, she's a smart cookie. She's a monster, though.
Just a test that involves cognition, the brain, processing information. So, I give you 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. What number comes next?
22.
Right.
But that's just if you can't add 2. Also, that's a measure of your education.
1, 3, 5, 7, 9. What comes next? And he
Probably
said 22.
Well, he's
Isn't
making
that-
a joke. It's 11. He doesn't
Okay.
think it's 22, HK.
Okay.
Good guess.
11.
So something like that, or I give you some
So
number.
you're testing whether someone is over the age of 4.
One.
Panicking, panicking now because I'm going to have to answer it.
Like, this is just pattern recognition. Like, pattern recognition doesn't make you smart.
If I give you like 1, 7, 3, and I'll repeat it back.
Oh, 173.
Okay, and now I ask you to do it in reverse order.
371.
Okay, so now that's the digit span
This is great.
task,
This is
and then
great.
reverse digit span. So I can give you the numbers. So you repeat it in the same order, or you can.
But how is that even useful? You can just write it down and have that answer fucking whenever you need it. Reading it backwards.
Is that intelligence? I mean, no one would have really thought about. No one probably wouldn't have occurred to you to even think about that as being intelligence, right? But okay, it's just a cognitive. But let's come up with some examples of cognitive tests. Whether you call it intelligence or not, there's an objective answer. So,
Wait, what?
somebody
No.
using your
Well, it depends.
Whether you call it intelligence determines whether there's an objective answer.
Well, we'll see what he comes up with for his example of a cognitive test.
brain,
Okay.
you can process information to get the objectively correct or incorrect answer for these questions. Now, you can do it for other domains, like spatial reasoning. So I ask you, how would you rotate this shape in order to fit it in like, to another shape? That's something I definitely don't consider intelligence, being basically mentally disabled at this.
But okay, so here's another question about
And yet, so many IQ tests are literally that.
what you're explaining. But had you your entire life been trained with this spatial awareness, and how do you presumably you would perform better in the test?
In my case, I'm not sure. But normally, yes.
Yeah. And so that's where people, I think, were going, well, hang on, a lot of this is culture and education. And, if you've got to draw on a stereotype.
This guy's presenting such a fucking dumb version of this dumb argument that even Andrew Gold is like, I don't know about this.
I think it's true. Perhaps Asian parents, or East Asian, I mean, or maybe Ashkenazi Jewish parents who...
East Asian, want to make sure you don't mean the fucking Indians.
Push their kids to learn
Dummies.
things to pass tests. They're always going to perform better in IQ.
Yeah, so that's the next step. So first, we'll make a collection of these kinds of tests, and we can also include, let's say, tests of analogies, which we could be more suspicious about whether this is something that could be influenced by culture, because it involves use of words, which are clearly culturally.
Okay, so this right here, this is a really big point, because culture absolutely determines your score on an IQ test, because guess who the IQ test is written fucking for?
Or by.
Yeah, by and for. People in your culture.
Right.
So if your culture decides this is what's smart, let's test for this, then only people in your culture will score high on that test. If I were to write what I consider like an IQ test, if someone were to task me to write an IQ test and I wrote it based on what I think intelligence is, it absolutely wouldn't apply to like a lot of people in the world, because they don't have the same culture as me. I can't objectively measure someone's intelligence outside of my own culture, because intelligence has a meaning specific to my culture. Well, I probably couldn't even write it for my culture 100 years ago. Well, because
not only that, but things are it's going to get lost in translation. Like when you try to give the test cross-culturally, it might not even be that somebody from a different culture doesn't understand the concept. It might be that they understand the concept in an entirely different way because they've been exposed to it in an entirely different way. And the way they've been exposed to it doesn't translate into the way that you've been exposed to it. And so when you ask the question, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Even though they know what you're talking about, they just don't know what you're talking about because of how you're talking about it.
It's kind of like there are a lot of different cultural words, like words in different languages for colors that we don't have in English. Like, well, we might have them, but they're not common. So cyan is a completely different color than blue. But most people, when they see cyan, would call it blue, even though on the color wheel, the objective definition of color, blue and cyan are as far from each other as green and yellow. So if us in our American culture were to define intelligence as the ability to tell the difference between like green and yellow, and we were to give our test to someone from a culture that defines blue and cyan as like completely different colors, and green and yellow as like about the same color, most people who would see yellow in that culture would call it green. To us, they would be, dumb morons. And to them, we would be dumb morons. We look at the sky and we call it blue. That's not blue, that's cyan.
And not for nothing, then like now you're just calling anybody who's like red, green, colorblind an idiot too.
Yeah.
Right? Like but your ability to like see colors the way that someone else sees them doesn't mean that you're smart or stupid or anything like that. It just fucking means you see colors differently. Speaking of colors, there's a really good example from, I think it was the 70s, where there was a test where what is a ruby? What is a ruby? And the acceptable answers were that it was a color or a gemstone. But the problem is at that time, ruby was a really common name for that black folks were naming their daughters. And so the answer, well, Ruby is my cousin, was the wrong answer. And that's fucking, well, all right. That sounds like would be the right. If I was that person's cousin, I'd be like, excuse you, that's the right answer.
Yeah. But like you mentioned, seeing colors differently. We don't see colors differently. Like different cultures see the exact same colors. And there have been studies about this where your language defines how you perceive the colors that you see. We look at the sky in English speaking cultures and we see blue, even though most of the time the sky is not blue, it's cyan. But to us, cyan is blue. But it's like seeing a banana, a ripe banana, and calling it green.
Right.
And it's not green, it's yellow. But that's only because we speak English, where we differentiate green and yellow.
Right. English is a very, let's say RGB, whereas other cultures might be more CMYK.
Yep.
Okay, but for now, we just make a battery of tests that have objectively right or wrong answers in all sorts of domains that have nothing to do with each other. Remembering digits and rotating shapes and making analogies and some basic quantitative questions that draw on mathematical knowledge that's known to everybody who went to elementary school.
What about people that didn't go to elementary school?
Give a population all these tests that we came up with. And we make a very interesting discovery, which is that performance on all the tests is highly correlated with each other. So the people who are good at analogies are good at remembering numbers and repeating them back in reverse order. And people who
space. Apart from you.
With some exceptions, people who are good at rotating shapes or good at everything else. And IQ.
But then you're just testing somebody's education. That's all you're testing at this point is their education. If they've had a well-rounded education, they're going to tend to be better at all of these things, even if they excel at one or the other of them, maybe because they either took an interest to it or maybe have a little more natural affinity toward math or whatever, or maybe there is no such thing as a natural affinity toward math. But like, this is just testing someone's education level.
Yeah, you might be able to test for outliers, but the entire, the statistics of this are meaningless.
Is supposed to represent this underlying factor that explains differences in ability across individuals across the battery of tests. So IQ is supposed to be, if I can give you only one number to represent a person's intelligence, I could give you his score on any one of the specific.
But that's the problem, is that you want to just give everybody a number and fucking stack rank them like that. Like, that's dumb as fuck.
Mm-hmm. And that would give you the maximum amount of information about that test. But how do I give you the one number that gives me the most information about an individual's performance on all the tests? And that would be his IQ. Now, this
is IQ.
About where IQ comes from or how you get more or less IQ, whether it's genes or environment that determines it. And so that's the next.
You get more IQ.
Well,
you just take more tests. Look at, actually, I took 3 tests, my IQ, according to these 3 tests, 342. I added them.
Before I get to that step, another step in between is that IQ has more predictive value than anything else you can measure in social science.
Predictive of what?
It's not perfect. Not at all. But
predictive of the zip code they grew up in, probably.
Education and job performance across the more complex the job, the better IQ is a predictor of your performance.
But none of this. Okay, so this is a standardized test that asks you a bunch of questions that might be relevant to your job performance. Sure, I guess. But none of this points to anything other. None of this points to any of like the core hypothesis. The thing they're kind of dancing around here is that what we've crudely described as race is it's got its thumb on the scale pretty strongly as to how smart you are, right? They're not saying that, because that's what they mean. That's what this is about, but they're not saying that.
Police officer in the military, firefighter, avoiding car crashes, here's
a fun fact. I've actually taken IQ tests.
Oh, I'm glad
life.
that we're talking about your experience taking IQ tests. Go on.
And my score on an IQ test depends quite a bit on whether I've taken Ritalin that day. If I take Ritalin, I score a lot higher on an IQ test. So, I mean, if we're talking about factors for IQ, how about drugs?
Yeah, performance enhancing drugs like steroids for your brain or something. I don't know.
Small
I don't know enough
space,
about
right?
Ritalin
Driver
and
can't see me.
its effects on the
That's
brain.
a decision more likely to be made by somebody who can't rotate shapes.
Right. You've got to be careful.
Also, your socioeconomic status is highly correlated to whether you can be identified as having ADHD and also whether you can be medicated once you are identified as having ADHD.
Right, because the and it's getting better, hopefully. And maybe it'll get worse now for whatever reason, but it's getting better because for a long time they just assumed the black people just wanted drugs.
I use my other intelligence to compensate for that. So we have this objective way to measure, and I've been calling it intelligence, but we don't have to call it intelligence.
It absolutely is not objective. What the fuck is he talking about? We do not have an objective way to measure. He just said, he just admitted we don't have an objective way to measure it.
This is as good a place as any to fucking put a fork in this.
Put a fork in that guy, man. He is cooked.
So what I want people to do, if we can, this guy's name was Nathan Confast. During the break, everybody, if we could look up and see why he actually got fired from Cambridge, that'd be fantastic. Because I have a feeling I'm going to go with hostile work environment, created hostile work environment. As at least one of the reasons, if there was any public disclosure as to why he was fired. A lot of the times, like with Peter Boghossian, we didn't find out until much later, and that was from other people who he worked with. First thing we found out was that he was using human subjects without following the rules around using human subjects in his research, which is yikes. But then we found out later that he was just a pain in the fucking ass to work with. Just an absolute fucking bastard at work, right? Not nice to the students, not nice to the other faculty, extra shitty to the fucking university, maintenance staff. We found out all that shit about him afterward. And I think this guy seems like one of those guys that if you had the office next to this guy, you'd look both ways before you leave your office. You know what I'm saying? But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was just that he's too smart. I don't know. Maybe his IQ's too high. Okay. His IQ's just too high.
Just too smart.
Too smart for Cambridge. Anyway, I bet he was a DEI hire at Cambridge. Self, you want to close the show out?
Sure. Thank you for tuning in. This has been Intellectual Dollar Tree. I almost said How the Tech Are You, which, by the way, is another great show. It's available on YouTube. And if you want to check out all our other shows, you can do that at echoplexmedia.com. We do this show, Intellectual Dollar Tree, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time on twitch.tv/echoplexmedia. If you want to watch us live, definitely tune in after the song we're about to play. We're going to go into red light, where we change the color of the lights and the contents of our drinks, and we have a lot more fun. So definitely check us out live sometime.
Anything is more fun than what we just went through.
Yeah. If you want to support us, you can also find support links at echoplexmedia.com. If you're listening on the pod, thank you so much for checking us out. If you're listening live, stay tuned for After the Song, where we go into red light. And now this is Boomers by Periscope.